Hey, everybody, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today, I have my good friend, the owner slash independent filmmaker of Ravenswood Media, David McGowan, with me. And we wanted to talk about two classic movies, Meet John Doe and Network, and how they correlate to the sensationalized media that we have today. And first off, I want to start out by saying I don't think that the coronavirus story is in its of itself sensationalized as an extremely rare new disease that is taking a massive amount of deaths, and it is a horrifying thing. Yet at the same time, I think the media is perhaps capitalizing on everyone's fear by releasing some articles that maybe aren't up to full journalism standards. And these movies are sort of a contemporary lens to not only this particular event, but of various news events, the creation of sort of opinion journalism, media, and every reality TV and things relating to that. So, with that said, I was wondering, David, this was the movie you suggested to me, which was a Frank Capra film, or Capra, but Frank Capra film called I'm sorry, Capricorn, Frank Capra film. Now I got it. Called Meet John Doe. So why did you suggest this movie to me?
Well, because it's a really good example of the early 1930s uh, screwball comedy,
Mhm.
and the reason I liked it was because it's so full of such joyful cynicism,
Yes.
and that was sort of the a motif back then that everybody assumed everybody was the on a scam, and
Mhm.
the movie in itself plays off of that because it's everybody in the news department that the film opens in, they all know that the newspaper business, the news business, is primarily a business. It means they're not there for First Amendment rights or for free functioning press as ensconced in our Constitution. News is a business and it's about
Yeah.
money. And so I found it really interesting that both Meet John Doe and Network begin with people losing their jobs. That's what starts both movies. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because the plot to Meet John Doe in a nutshell is basically they're cleaning house at Barbara Stanwyck's news agency. She plays a character named Ann Mitchell, and at this agency, when they start firing everyone, she's included in it. So she has to find a way to basically keep her job. So the way she does that is she fabricates a story about a guy who's your average Joe or your average John, whatever you want to call it, but your John Doe, I guess you could say. And she fabricates this suicide note from him where he said, I worked for this agency. I lost my job now. I'm struggling to make ends meet like everyone else. So I'm going to jump off the top of a building come Christmas Eve um, in order to prove a point that nobody cares about us. And from that, she has to find someone who will pretend to be this John Doe because when she tells everybody this is a fake letter, I wrote it, everybody loved how sensationalized and how dramatic it was. So they needed someone who could be the everyman. So they grabbed Gary Cooper, who plays John Willoughby, to play John Doe. And from there, things get a little complicated. And yes, it's sort of a more likable, cynical movie than something like Network, which is very in your face, very crass. Sort of at the time, it was viewed as completely uh, impossible to happen. And of course, it doesn't seem too far off base. But with Meet John Doe, it really is sort of a commentary on how we try to find people other than ourselves to cling on to in order to give us hope. Whether
and how the news business
Mm-hmm.
capitalizes on that. And that's
Oh,
where the cynicism comes in, because we all think of news as being objective, there's journalistic standards, so forth. But both of these movies kind of draw the curtain back on that and say, no, that's just a thin veneer. It's really a business, and we're in here to make money. And any way we can make money is fair.
mm-hmm.
And so if Barbara Stanwyck uh, writes a bogus suicide note and then works backwards to find a guy to act like he wrote it to save the paper, that's fine. And what struck me was that once they find out that she's been scamming, all of her bosses, everybody at the newspaper buys in on it.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody immediately believes it, which shows just how gullible the press is
No, they,
itself.
they I mean, they don't believe in the letter, but
They believe it
they
was real at first
they
until
say
she
they'll
tells
go
them.
along with her
Yeah.
scam. Yeah.
Well,
And
yeah,
same with network.
at first they thought, you know, we don't know who wrote this. You know, this could be some disgruntled employee. Then they find out it was her and they say, they don't go, how could you write something like that? It's completely false. They go, hey, that's brilliant. I love that
Right.
idea. So they
Right.
construct a narrative off of that. And really, when you watch any, I'm not going to say left or right, but any opinion based sort of news, there is this absolute skew towards an outraged opinion, whether
Right.
you're someone on Fox News praising Trump, or whether you're someone on MSNBC, uh, destroying him, or not even Trump, but it could be anything. You have your angle, and now we have newscasters who are telling you what to think, constructing a sort of narrative instead of letting you know what to think. And Meet John Doe is more about sort of the paper industry, how sensationalism, fear, is something that drives them. And their fear is John Doe is the average guy and he might kill himself. And we don't want him to kill himself. We don't want him to die. What can we do to save him? So Barbara
And it's
Stanwyck,
all a lie.
yeah, and it's all BS.
Yeah.
Barbara Stanwyck sort of finds through her mother a way to inspire hope through him, where he tells the John Does in the world to actually go out and tell people that they do matter and there is a reason to hope for them and that they shouldn't be ignored by the system anymore.
But the system sees that happening,
Mm-hmm.
and then that industrialist, I forget his name,
Yes.
sees the John Doe clubs as a way for him to get a foothold in American politics.
Mm.
And I think he was running for president, maybe.
It was
And
Edward Arnold's character who basically ran the paper there.
yeah, he was the
Yeah.
owner, right? One of
Yeah.
the shareholders. But I love that montage they do of him watching his motorcycle corps police force doing their maneuvers on their motorcycles. Like this is at the time Nazism has just been established in Germany. This is like 1934. What year was that? Meet John Doe.
1941.
Oh, it was 41. Okay. So by this time, the idea of Nazism and that sort of fascist Edward Arnold's son, or what was his nephew, comes in
Mm.
with those jack boots and the leather jacket. I mean, he looked like something out of fascist Germany.
Mm. Yeah, it really was. There was a certain intimidation when it came to the organization that ran everything, where they kind of had this militaristic stance. I remember when they had the John Doe rally, immediately when John Willoughby starts actually, because initially in the film, to go back a little bit, Gary Cooper's character, John Willoughby, who pretends to be John Doe, basically through an audition process, he doesn't believe in all this stuff he's saying. They're paying him to say a few words, and then he's going to go off on his way on a train. outside of the United States, I believe.
Yeah,
And
and set for life.
yeah, yeah,
Was
he's
enough money? Yeah, just go away. Yeah, set for life.
yeah. And what subsequently happens is he becomes so famous, he can't go anywhere without people, bothering him saying, "Oh my God, you're John Doe." And from there, he starts to believe in the
Develops a
narrative.
conscience. Yeah,
Yeah, he believes in this narrative that Stanwyck's character weaves for him because it is a solid narrative. It is about caring for the everyman because in her position, she did feel like the everyman or every woman, I should say. And through that, because he believed in it, he stood up to the system. And then the system says, no, 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 no. You're not the everyman. You're just part of our story. And
yeah.
if you break from the script, we'll expose you for the liar that you are. We'll tell everyone that you were an actor and that this is all fake. And because of that, we'll destroy everything that you stood for. And that really speaks to the politics of today, maybe even back then. Who knows? But
Well, it's striking the parallels with Network.
yeah, it's about weaving a story. Uh,
Edward Arnold gives Willoughby the speech about like, hey, you're on our payroll
mhm,
and you're going to do this thing. And then you think about Ned Beatty's speech to not to Peter Finch,
mhm.
um, essentially saying the same thing.
Yes, when Ned Beatty, who only came in for a day for that role, and he got an Oscar, because Ned Beatty, he plays Arthur Jensen, and he is the man who runs the CCA. And basically, what happens is when Howard Beale breaks from their traditional message on the show, and he says the CCA is getting money from the Saudis, and that's how we get our funding. And you call the White House and you tell them to stop getting their money. That's when he crosses the line. And it's
Right.
the same thing as with Meet John Doe. Immediately when John Doe says, well, this isn't fake, and I should talk about fair wages for people and this and that, and how we're getting our money, that's when you piss people off, is when you go after their wallets. When you go after Fox News's shareholders or CNN's or whoever, it's like that's when they'll get you fired instantly. They'll destroy you. And it's not about who runs the country, who's sitting in the White House that's in control of everything, but really who's paying that person. And it was a message in Meet John Doe, and it's a message in this. In Network, I mean. In Network as well. Meet John Doe and in Network.
Yeah, the other parallel is that they both begin with a guy losing people losing jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Both have suicide right up front.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is what role alcohol plays in as a it's alcohol is always in the background. You know, it's kind of goes with the territory of journalism. Those scenes in Network where they're sitting in taverns, smoking cigarettes, drinking, it's like, man, that's all disappeared.
Well, now it has for now, you know,
Yeah,
and I'll certainly, and maybe I should just get to this as we're going to it because the overarching theme of this movie and everything is sensationalized media. Keep them scared, weave a story. I just clicked on the Washington Post today, and I usually read them. I like it. I like what they say, but Washington Post, big bold letters, front page, 100,000 deaths.
yep,
There's a big scary black and white picture of the United States here, and there's like these glowing things that look like a virus inside of it. There was another article that said today, even with a vaccine, coronavirus could last forever and our lives will change indefinitely. There was a story on CNN talking about life after the coronavirus and all of it, and it made it look like this horrible George Orwellian 1984-esque horrifying post-apocalyptic future. And the reason they do that is because if they say to people, this is a hard time, but we'll get through this, and I think the world will come out to be a better place, nobody's going to want to read that because they're not scared. They'll say, well, we're okay. So it's
Well,
not
to
going to
give you a
weave.
little pushback, though, we got a bumbler in chief that
Yeah.
keeps coming up with false statements, telling people to wash their lungs with Clorox, take hydro, whatever that chemical is. I think today he was advocating for healthy people to inject themselves with insulin. So,
That was yesterday. Yeah.
oh, okay. So part of what you're seeing with the sensationalization in the newspapers or the media is trying to say, hey, no, this is really serious. No matter what
Yeah.
he says, this is really serious. So in
Absolutely.
that sense, I'm kind of glad that they do make a big point out of it.
Well, I think there's a yin and a yang to everything in life. And I would say that with this president, he has done the most chaotic, horrible thing imaginable, completely ignoring this virus and just letting people die while he goes golfing. This happened back in November, and exposing him for all of his hideous features is something that you have to cover.
Yeah,
And it's certainly the way things are, they're the way they are because he threw out the playbook that the president before him wrote. That was, I believe, 69 pages or so. He had a global pandemic office that was completely ignored. And I want to emphasize the term global. This affected the world because this $200 million office that Trump got rid of just because it was under Obama's name could have saved not just the United States, but various countries. We were getting prepared for this and we threw it out. So the media exposing that, absolutely. I agree. We should expose that. But when they produce articles saying life will never be the same again, here's 100,000 deaths, the next wave is coming right away, be scared, stay inside your houses, that's where I start to take some issue. You
yeah,
know, some of the issue is uh, Chris Cuomo got the coronavirus disease, and essentially he didn't seem that bad off, but immediately they're doing a video from his basement all the time. And he's saying he's not talking to his kids, and he's crawling out of his basement one day, and he's saying this is the first time I've seen my wife or anyone.
yeah,
And then you find out there's a story where he actually got into a face-to-face encounter with someone in a public park because he was walking around, and the guy asked him, shouldn't you be in quarantine? He threatened the guy, and he said, hey, I'm going to expose you, and people are going to remember your name. And he was cussing the guy out and threatening him.
yikes.
Yeah, that's where you go, okay, so we could tell Cuomo was maybe weaving a bit of a narrative there. Not Anthony Cuomo, his brother, Chris. And that's where it's like, yeah, they are reporting on real numbers, on real fears, on real facts. But at the same time, you'll get certain anchors who will come on MSNBC, well, them too, but on CNN or Fox News, they paint a rosy picture saying everything's going to be fine. They're the extreme opposite. But and they praise Trump, but they're even more destructive than the left networks. But on the left networks, you'll get, there was some epidemiologist who was on Anderson Cooper's show who said we're going to have to social distance until 2022, and he basically said like we're just going to be stuck inside for like 2 years. And they put those scary headlines in big bold red letters because they know you're going to click on it. And right now the media is going hog wild with the fear. So there's both sides to it.
The other thing I noticed between Network and Meet John Doe was that they were corporate takeovers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even in the John Doe time in like 1940, they're
Yeah.
emphasizing this sort of nameless, faceless corporation was going to take over this, mom and pop newspaper.
Yeah.
And same with network. It was a corporation coming in.
The Saudis. Yeah. CCA.
CCA.
Yeah. Well, the CCA got the money from the Saudis, and as we know, the Saudis do give a lot of money to top political figures. And again, Edward Arnold's character, they don't have the name of him on IMDb, and I don't remember it at the top of my head, but he kind of plays like if you've seen um, It's a Wonderful Life, he's basically Mr. Potter. He has the hat on, the glasses, and he's overweight, and he says, "I'll show you," and he's that kind of character.
Yeah, the neat thing about that character, though, that they added, and when you watch the movie a couple times, you'll notice that
Mm.
he's always taking his glasses off and cleaning them
Yes,
as
he's
if he
fogging them.
can't see.
He can't see through his own bullshit, or it's like he's
Right.
trying to cleanse himself because there's maybe a certain underlying guilt to what he's saying.
So you
You
notice
know,
that too?
yeah, but I think I might be over analyzing it. It might not be there.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm sure Capra put that in, that have the character take his glasses off and be cleaning them. And it didn't just happen once, it happens almost every time that guy shows up on screen.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I'm gonna give my spiel, I'm gonna give my bullshit, so I'm going to
Thank
clean them.
God Barbara Stanwyck is such a babe.
Well, yeah, so let's try to avoid that type of language. We're in 2020 now.
You
But
can't say babe
she
anymore.
no,
What can you say,
she's
beautiful?
beautiful. She's a
Oh, all
very
right,
beautiful
yeah.
woman. Yeah. Um, but no, I mean, back then, here's one issue I took with Meet John Doe, which was uh it's not really explained why Barbara Stanwyck falls in love with Gary Cooper. We get that she actually starts believing in the message of hope and helping the everyman because her mother struggled, and back then people kind of lived with their parents because they were not as they didn't have as much independence in some certain aspects. I'm guessing, I don't know. But her mother essentially told her, why don't I never hear anything on the news about people inspiring hope and telling the everyday man that they matter and to love each other, and you should put that in your newspaper. And then when Gary Cooper starts believing it, she starts believing it, and she falls in love with him because of
Well,
that.
wait, didn't her mother give her a letter or a speech from her father?
uh I don't believe so, but I could be
No,
wrong.
yeah, no, that was the turning point. Barbara Stanwyck's father evidently was in journalism somehow and
uh
wrote a speech. And when she read the speech, she was inspired. She heard in her father's speech the same things that John Doe was uh, uh, preaching, and that's what motivated her. I think that's what happened. Yeah,
yeah. Well, essentially, I think she wrote one, but it was inspired from what her
yeah, that's
father
it.
was saying. Yeah.
Oh, his diaries.
Yes, yes. But like again, outside of sort of the idea of what they were both saying and starting to believe in, we don't get why they fall in love with each other, other than the fact that at the time they were like two of the most gorgeous people in Hollywood, and they had
Yeah,
to get
right.
together. They were sort of today's version. Gary Cooper or Barbara Stanwyck was sort of today's version of Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. So that outside of that kind of like forced love story that we didn't like, it didn't seem like we needed that. It could have been a platonic relationship. That was the one issue I took with the film. But yeah, it's funny how in 1941 they were really capitalizing on how people were bought out by the media and how the media spins a certain tale and a certain story and a certain emotion and creates certain figures, certain characters out of people in order to really drive through profits. I mean, when you look at any opinion journalist, and they're kind of like the John Doe of today. Um, and moving on from Meet John Doe, one movie that kind of like is a spiritual successor, the R-rated version of Meet John Doe, is 1976's Network. Um, a classic multi-Oscar winning film. That I mean, this is at the time when it came out, people thought this movie's too over the top. It's too cynical to become reality. Of course, years later, everything sort of became reality with it. I mean,
Yeah, it's like unbelievable. It's like they wrote the blueprint for Fox News,
yes, yes.
the business model.
Yeah, and even Fox's television network. If I were to say, if I'm reading an IMDb sort of note on here that I noticed, and it said, uh, writer Peter Chayefsky, I believe you pronounce it,
Patty,
huh? Paddy, I'm
Patty.
sorry, Paddy. Yeah, Paddy. Chayefsky was eerily prescient in his screenplay in three significant ways. First, the screenplay pertains to the going on at UBS, the fictional fourth network existing alongside the non-fictional ABC, CBS, and NBC. In 1997, Fox became the real fourth network. Second, in her speech to her employees about her goals for UBS, Diana Christensen, Faye Dunaway's character, don't I don't she says, I don't want conventional programming on this program, on this network. I want counterculture. I want anti-establishment. The type of programming delivered by Fox with its debut series Married with Children and the Tracy Ullman Show. Third, Diana Christensen's creation of the show about the I'm gonna really screw up the name of this. The Immiscible Liberation Army. Basically, the
Ecumenical,
liberation, immunical liberation army,
ecumenical.
ecumenical. Thank you. The ecumenical liberation army and its criminal activities is prescient of reality TV, and that as a result of the writer's strike of 1998, which lasted 22 weeks, Fox started to run low on new content. To replace it, the network began to show Cops, which was in 1989, which featured police officers trying to thwart criminal activity. Despite very noteworthy predecessors such as An American Family in 1973 and in 1973, which depicted the experiences of the Loud family, and Scared Straight in 1978, which that was a bunch of prisoners who were scaring a bunch of kids as to what will happen if they keep screwing up. They'll wind up where they are. Some
Yeah.
considered Cops in '89 to be the true uh, starter of reality TV. I mean that all kind of happened, and now subsequently we have nothing but reality shows. We have our Fox Newses, and we have the if it bleeds, it leads television. I mean, when they were talking about the Liberation Army, they said they wanted to stage bank robberies, they wanted to stage terrorist activities, and although we don't have something quite of that nature, whenever there's a shooting, it is all over the news circuit.
I liked her comment at one point. She goes, she emphasizes we need to articulate the public's rage.
Yes, yes, and that's where Howard Beale's mental breakdown really came in.
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean Howard Beale, who won an Oscar posthumously. Peter Finch won that Oscar posthumously for playing Howard Beale, I should say. Uh, he he basically said like he was sick of bullshit. He ran out of stuff to say. It began with him threatening to um, take his own life on stage or on the air, which was inspired by a news journalist who came before this film. I believe she was in Ohio. Her name was Christine Chubbuck, and she shot herself on the air.
Right.
Yeah, and that was sort of the precipice for this film. Um, so essentially, it was a reflection on that, and people thought it was a parody. But Sidney Lumet, the director of the film, had said himself that the movie wasn't a parody, but more or less, it was a reflection on where things were going with the media.
Boy,
And
was he right. I mean,
yeah,
it is. It's Fox News. I
yeah,
My favorite performance in that movie though is Robert Duvall. I thought he was excellent
yeah.
as
His
Hackett.
Frank Hackett, yeah, yeah. He was sort of the tough man who would tell you exactly what to do, And it was always because his ass is on the line, because Ned Beatty's Arthur Jensen was the man who ran this network. He ran the CCA,
Yeah.
and you didn't want to cross this guy. And there's a press calling in right now.
Sorry.
You're good.
So the not Barbara Stanwyck, Faye Dunaway did a great job. I really like that character. I was kind of disappointed in the ending. I thought it was a little too preachy between her and William Holden. First of all, it was kind of creepy. I mean, he was way too old to be with her. You know, it was just like, oh yeah. It's like in Vertigo, Jimmy Stewart with Kim Novak. You know, when he puts his arms around her to give her a kiss, you know, his hands look ancient. You know, it's like, oh no, I don't want to see this.
That's Hollywood defined. Every movie they'd like before today, they'd always have these younger women with these guys who were basically their
clearly
father's
beyond their
age.
expiration date.
Yeah. And yeah, William Holden was basically, his character was very fascinating. He played Max Schumacher,
Yeah.
and basically Holden wanted the integrity of journalism to stay alive. And he was arguing that you are turning the news into something perverse, and you're just trying to make these stories and nobody's going to want to hear this. And he was wrong. And they fired him because they didn't like the direction he was going, because it was going to lose everybody ratings. And I'm not sure why Faye Dunaway stuck with his character when he couldn't give her anything in return, because the whole point to her character was that she was heartless. Sidney Lumet even told Faye Dunaway that if she tried to give her any sort of empathy during any of the takes in the film, that he would just cut it.
Yeah.
And she did a great job of just playing this heartless bitch.
I can't use the word babe, but you can use the word bitch.
Well, because we're talking about the character in terms of hang on, and in terms of her persona.
Sell it to someone else.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Take a look at Barbara Stanwyck's outfits in Meet John Doe, and compare it to Faye Dunaway's. I think somebody was looking at Meet John Doe when they were starting to make Network, because the outfits are sort of similar.
That sort of, I guess so. They showed a lot of leg.
Yeah.
And they had that
smoky stuff, you know. And, yeah. Anyhow, I guess we can't talk.
It was like sexy business attire in a way.
Oh no, it wasn't business attire at all. She was hot. Oh.
Yeah, whatever. It's okay. It's your generation. No.
Watching Howard Beale at the end, though, with his new show, you know, with the big stained glass behind him.
The Howard Beale show.
Yeah. The thing that came to my mind was the Glenn Beck show with those blackboards. Glenn Beck is like, Howard Beale was his model, I'm sure. He watched Network in the 70s, and that's who he modeled his persona after.
And do you remember there was a political show on way back? It was called Crossfire.
Oh yeah,
and it featured
Buckley.
And Tucker Carlson, and these guys would just basically be on a stage while they're screaming at each other.
Yeah,
and it was just political spectator sports.
Well, no, the original Crossfire, if it was the one with William Buckley from the 80s.
Yeah, I didn't see that one though.
That was a good show. Buckley was conservative. He was a goofball. I mean, it was like he had poor ideas, but he was articulate. He never screamed. He had a rapier wit, and that devolved into that one show though with Tucker Carlson, Peter Bagala,
Yeah.
and then Jon Stewart. Did you ever see that one?
Yeah, that's I was gonna say he came on that show and pretty much exposed them for hurting the media,
But
and
he really
he owned them.
saved his venom for Tucker Carlson. He said, he goes to him, he goes, "How old are you?" And
Yeah,
and Tucker Carlson wouldn't answer, and then finally he said, "Oh, I'm 32 or something." He goes,
yeah,
"And you still wear a bow tie?"
yeah. He stopped wearing a bow tie after that. I
That's
noticed.
right.
Yeah, it's like that.
Oh man, where is Jon Stewart now?
He pops up here and there on Colbert's show and all that. But yeah, God, I miss him so much. Like Trevor Noah does a great job, but
Didn't
you
know,
can't
right? It's not the
replace
same.
Jon Stewart. You just can't.
I
Yeah.
thought it was cool with Duvall's character. They named him Hackett,
Yes.
meaning hack. Like
Yeah.
you're just a
Yes.
hack
Yes.
guy, you know?
Hack journalism.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the thing. They didn't give a shit about facts. What they gave a shit about was weaving a narrative, weaving an emotion. They wanted to tap into the despair of the American public to get people, as the famous quote goes, mad as hell. And that really riled the public to want to listen to him like he was a preacher. And the best part about that is when they first have their live Howard Beale show. He goes on the stage and he's literally telling his audience to their face, most of you don't read. You live
Right.
your entire lives
And
off
they're
of this
cheering him.
television. Yeah, he's calling them idiots to their face,
Yeah.
and they're cheering him on. It's just like what Trump did when he went on stage and he said, "I could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and not lose any supporters."
Yeah, that's where the two movies diverge. Is that in Meet John Doe, the public is is given a lot of credit. Like
Yeah,
they do want to be good, and they do reach out to each other. And when they find out that John Doe was a fraud, at first they're hurt, but then they understand it was a good idea. The public comes out looking good. In network, no, the public they're as bad as anybody else.
yeah. I mean, in Meet John Doe, there's a very essential scene where the big bad CEO exposes John Doe for the fraud he is on stage because he crosses them. When he's about to make a speech, they cut his mic. Everyone turns on him, but
Yeah,
in the end, when he
that's
actually
a
is
great scene with him trying to talk.
trying to explain his way
Yeah,
through a complicated situation,
he gets
people
hit with
wanted,
a tomato.
yeah. It's like when someone tries to explain a complicated situation, but people want simple answers.
Yeah, and they're all
And
yelling at him, and
yeah,
yeah, yeah, he
and
was a good actor. I mean, he's not like a stage actor, but a movie star actor.
yes,
Gary Cooper.
Gary Cooper has that every guy, oh gee
Yeah,
whiz persona, despite the fact that he's like 6 feet tall and gorgeous. Like you can just buy him as
yeah,
this as
yeah.
this.
You'd like to be friends with him. You could see
Yeah,
yourself having a beer with him, right?
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, but the one thing I I don't know if this was intentional with me, John Doe, or not. Just to bounce back for a moment on that, is people didn't care about John Doe until they found out, oh, maybe he will kill himself. It's sort of it's sort of a commentary on society. People don't care about you until you're dead, or until you
Yeah,
try to kill yourself. They don't
yeah.
listen until they don't
Well, I
listen
mean, that's the
until
way we are. We always, everybody minds their own business.
yeah.
But when somebody's threatening suicide, you got to step up, and
That's when
come out of
people
your
care.
shell
Yeah.
and extend yourself. No,
Yeah.
I'm down with that. I mean, that didn't bother me.
I mean,
But the
it
thing
did a
that,
little bit because like they didn't care when they thought he was fraud, but when he's gonna kill
well, he's a
himself, it's like, oh,
hobo.
now he cares,
Yeah.
and now they care. But that's the thing. You have to go the most extreme measure possible for people to really give two hoots about you. He logs. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that was cool that they used that term helot. How many people would have known what a helot is?
I don't.
I'm assuming you don't know what a helot is.
If I were to guess, it means degenerate,
No, well,
loser.
they were the indigenous people of Peloponnesia when the Spartans took over the peninsula, and so they were a suppressed people, and they tried to resist the Spartans, but they were like black people in America, in slavery.
Ooh, ooh, wow.
Yeah.
Historical context. You
Yeah,
know,
but it's funny that the screenwriter would use that term, that who would know who a helot is?
yeah.
But it
Uh,
sounded good anyhow.
yeah. I mean, you don't know. I mean, if you watch a lot of movies from that time, I mean, look at A Wonderful Life. That the one black person in the movie is the maid, you know, and that's
Oh,
it.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
no, no, that's not true. It's a Wonderful Life. There was another. Oh, she was the maid. Yeah, but she did get a speaking part, which was,
oh, that's good.
yeah. Capra was pretty good in that regard. Capra was a little more open
Yeah.
to including black people. He didn't make them, the step and fetch it stereotypes. I
Yeah.
mean, he didn't have a lot of room to give black people roles and so forth. But when they show up in the movie, they're treated with respect, which was not, the thing to do back in the 1930s and 40s.
Yeah. They weren't the Jim Crow caricatures. Yeah.
And
Uh,
the other thing about well, when we talk about helots in Network,
mm,
uh, the Faye Dunaway character makes a reference to Savonarola.
mm,
And I wonder, like, you would not hear a reference like that today in movies.
mm.
I mean, I'm assuming you don't know who Savonarola is either, right?
No.
Yeah, so he was a Renaissance, late Renaissance uh, detractor from the Catholic Church that got burned at the stake, and uh,
Ah.
and just important in the history of freedom. And so it's an interesting that well, Patty Chayefsky's a really sharp screenwriter. I mean,
Yes. He wrote
he's
Marty.
an excellent.
Mm,
And you know what? That's why I was kind of disappointed with the end of the movie, because he
yeah.
had me all along. Uh, but then that busting the Faye Dunaway character, William Holden busting her as he's leaving, it
Yeah.
just, I was like, it's kind of, 50s preaching,
Yes, it did feel a little like that too, I have to say. I remember I was watching it yesterday, and my friend who was watching it with me was essentially saying, "Boy, could they force that dialogue anymore?" You know, and I was like,
Right,
"Yeah, that's kind of
exactly.
true." Yeah,
And if you look back at it, in the 70s, even in the late 70s or mid 70s when the movie came out, feminism, the idea of feminism hadn't, the role of women in society hadn't really transformed itself. By the 75, we're still stuck in like the 1950s.
mm,
And so I think when they made the movie and the Faye Dunaway character, they were trying to make her look like she was sad because she was a successful career woman.
you
A
know,
lot of a lot of the audience in the 1970s would look at that and think, "Oh, that poor lady giving up having babies for her career," and never questioning that a woman could be happy not having babies and having a great career. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, it's sort of like the plot to Little Woman until it contradicts itself in the end.
I don't know Little Women, but
Yeah,
yeah,
okay, yeah. It's about a woman who doesn't want to be married and have kids and all that and wants to be independent and known as being independent on her own, and then she falls in love with a guy anyways in the end and
yeah,
does the whole 9 yards. But the interesting thing about Network and Meet John Doe is they're both about two strong female protagonists who are
yes,
journalists on their own who basically have to work within a man's world but prove that they can be the man and outsmart everyone. Although in the end, the system does kind of defeat them, and that's what happens with. Well, does I don't.
no, no, the system didn't defeat Barbara Stanwyck.
Yeah, she did win in the
She
end.
fell
Yeah,
in love with John Doe.
and they want towards his side. They almost do, but they don't in the end. And
Yeah, no,
also,
I love the Barbara Stanwyck character. I mean, I thought
yeah,
that was a really cool role, and it would have been, in some ways, I think audiences when the John Doe movie came out, I think they were treating the Barbara Stanwyck woman more sympathetic than even in the as a professional woman
Yeah.
than they were treating Faye Dunaway
Yeah.
as a professional woman. Yeah.
Yeah, like there was a respect and a love for that character where absolutely almost I don't think there's anyone outside of William Holden's character in Network who's a redeemable, kind human being. Everyone's just a
Right.
disgusting piece of shit, and Faye Dunaway is certainly that. And
You know what? We haven't mentioned the James Gleason character in Meet John Doe.
okay, which one was James Gleason's
It is the
character?
bald guy, the hardcore guy that was firing everybody in the beginning. That Barbara
Ah,
Stanwyck, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
he made a career out of being that sort of curmudgeon, uh, older guy, you know, that cynical, doesn't believe in anything. And that's why his little speech while he's drunk with the broken cigarette uh, resonated with me. I thought that was a really cool scene with him. Do
He
you know the
was
one I'm
he
talking about?
was yes, yes. It was yeah, he played Connell. And it's
What
funny
was his
because
character's name?
Connell, Connell.
Yeah.
And
You
Edward
notice that they're
Norton.
all Irish, you
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
I said Edward Arnold. I said Edward Norton. I'm sorry. Edward Arnold's character was DB Norton.
DB
He,
Norton,
mhm,
right?
yeah. Um, and Connell, I didn't even notice that was Connell's character until you brought it up because when he was so intoxicated, he just rambling. I just thought, why is he talking to this random guy in the bar when I was watching it yesterday? But now I realize, oh yeah, that was him. That was James Gleason, and he.
James Gleason had a solid career as a character actor in Hollywood, but
Mm,
he really made his name as a playwright. He was
mm,
a pretty well renowned New York playwright.
yeah, and even Network was actually adapted for the play, I believe.
Oh, it was a
If
play
you
first.
no, I think it was a movie first, but
Oh, and then it became
got
a play. Okay.
yeah, recently I think with Bryan Cranston uh
Okay, yeah.
playing
But
Howard
I'm
Beach.
not saying James Gleason wrote Meet John Doe. He
No,
did
no,
not. I'm
no,
just
the
saying that that actor James Gleason, as a sidebar, was a famous playwright.
yeah, Meet John Doe, if I look on here, was written by Robert Riskin. And
Okay.
yeah.
I
And
thought it was, I got it mixed up. I thought maybe Preston Sturgis wrote it, but no,
mhm,
Riskin. Okay.
okay,
I
yeah.
think Capra used Riskin on a couple movies.
Perhaps he did. If I were to pull it up, I don't know. I'd be like the Jamie to Joe Rogan here.
You know
Uh,
what's funny for me though is that you pick these two movies to talk about like journalism and so forth.
mhm.
Uh, the one movie that kind of encapsulates everything that I think you wanted to talk about is His Gal Friday.
His Gal Friday.
Yeah, with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell, and it was based on the Ben Heck play. What was it called? I can't remember. Ben Hecht was and Charles MacArthur were two pretty renowned playwrights in Chicago in the 20s, and they wrote this great play about journalists that hide a terrorist that's about to be executed, and it is the cynicism is off the charts. It's a great movie, a great play. They've done movies of it in a couple different ways, but His Gal Friday is my favorite.
Directed by Howard Hawks,
Yep.
written by Charles Lederer.
Well, the
Um,
screenwriter, yeah,
yeah, and then it
based
was
on the play
based on the
though.
play by Ben Heck and Charles MacArthur.
Yeah.
Very.
Charles MacArthur came from the family that started the Art Institute.
Oh, I see. Well,
Yeah.
that is certainly one to check out.
But
Uh,
what was the name of their play though that it was based on?
I don't know. I don't have it
It
on me.
doesn't say that. Okay.
Yes. But asides from that, uh, when we bounce back to Network, that the dialogue in the screenplay is very sort of Aaron Sorkin-esque. You know, it's very it's like everyone's sort of playing ping pong with their
Oh
words.
yeah,
Back,
yeah, it
yeah,
really good. Talking fast, bouncing
mhm.
things back. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's basically like a walking thesaurus of
Yeah,
terms that the average American wouldn't use, and it's very purposefully written like that. It's supposed to sound overtly articulate in order to highlight specifically with this film how these characters are far more educated than the
yeah. Well, I
everyday
think what they're trying to
man.
emphasize is an elitism.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. Is there's elitism to it, where they think they're smarter than the average everyday man, and they tell you what to think, what to
Right,
feel, what to watch, when to watch it, and they control the world. And that, I mean, the one of my favorite scenes actually is when Howard Beale walks into Ned Betty's office, and Howard Beale is so used to screaming at everyone, telling them what to think, and immediately Ned Betty puts Beale in his place, you
right.
know, and he starts shouting at the rafters as if he's angered God, and he says, "You don't know the forces for which you have angered. Am I coming through to you, sir?"
No, no. Actually, when he said that line,
Yeah.
he stopped yelling and he looked at Howard Bean and he goes, "Am I getting through to you?"
Yeah, that was after he did the whole monologue,
Right.
basically.
Yeah, it was
And then he
cool.
continues again. Yeah. He basically said to him, "I can shout too. And also, I have all the power. You're just an actor.
Right.
So shut up and play nice. You
And
can,
what does Howard Beale tell him?
okay."
No, no. He says,
I
"I've
saw
seen
God.
God."
Yeah, he thought he saw God because there's a scene earlier where he's
And
sleeping.
Ned Beatty says, "Perhaps you have, Mr. Beale."
Yeah. In other words, I am God, you know, and I'm telling you this.
You know what we've missed is that I'd like to bring up. I make it short, but
Hmm.
one of the things that I liked about Network the most was the the ecumenical uh, liberation army and how at the end they're
Hmm.
having a board meeting in their hideout.
Yes. And
And the communist woman is like screaming at him. He doesn't get this, and the guy. They're all arguing. And the guy takes his gun out and shoots. He goes, "Give her," and he uses some business term.
he's like, give them the assets.
Yeah,
And then they just keep going. They're
right.
talking business, but they're doing it with loaded guns,
Yeah.
you know, which is sort of what it's like when you watch the news today as well.
Everybody, even the communist Angela Davis like character was in on the take.
Yeah. Um, it's absolutely insane. I mean, this movie, outside of a few parts where they're talking to ecumenical liberation army, and they use that army to assassinate Howard Beale because his ratings are down, and
Right.
because he literally went from telling everyone to not give money to the CCA to telling them, well, we've done enough. And, we have to be angry at our government because they can't do anything because uh, Howard Jensen tells Beale, or Howard Jensen, I'm sorry, Arthur Jensen tells Beale to tell them, look, you could shout about democracy and how it's broken because that doesn't affect us. People were getting confused and bored by his mixed messaging, and they were starting to sense his bullshit in a way, and they were starting to get smarter by listening to him. So immediately when they turn on him, they kill him, and he died because of low ratings. Which I don't think you'd kill anyone over low ratings
Well,
in
no,
real
right.
life. Yeah.
That's why people thought it was over the top. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it gets over the top, but everything else is spot on. I mean, we
I
have.
didn't mind that. I didn't mind that part of it.
Oh, I
I don't
didn't
mind that
either.
was over the top with that. The only thing I minded was the ending with William Holden and Faye Dunaway. That just
Yeah,
fell flat.
the
It
big
didn't age
lofty
well.
speech. Yeah,
One more point was, gosh darn it, it's left me. Um,
but that's okay. When that thought gets back to you,
all
uh,
right.
uh, what I really appreciate about this movie is it kind of is a voice of rationalization if you look at the two side by side as to where you should limit your news intake and not take everything so seriously. Because now, as we're in the middle of this horrific pandemic, there's so much misinformation that a worst
Coming
case,
from the White House.
yes, coming from the White
I mean,
House,
that's unheard of.
coming from the White House, coming from journalism, coming from everywhere.
I think you're busting journalism. I don't see it. I see what I'm watching is journalists are trying to deal with an out of control White House, which has never ever happened before. And
Mhm.
they've got these rules that we're going to be objective and like, well, if we say something bad about Trump, we got to say something bad about Democrats. Well, no, you don't.
Well, no, 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 no. That's not what I mean, and I agree with you. They're exposing the White House for the absolute flaw that it is. What I am concerned about though is when they tell people that their lives are never going to be the same again, and that things are horrible,
No,
and
you got to make your own judgments on that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's opinion.
yeah, and that's when the opinion journalism reflects sort of the narrative lead that everyone is weaving, where there's good journalism, but then there's so much misinformation regarding, what's our society going to be like? How long are we really going to be locked in our houses? How susceptible are you really to dying? This, that, and the other. That it spirals out of control, and it creates complete panic among the masses, where you end up hurting a society rather than helping it. There's so many people who are struggling with mental illness, where if you're reading the news, it will cause you to go to an insane asylum just by reading it. I mean, you think about Network, Howard Beale was having a complete emotional breakdown, and William Holden was the one guy who would support him, but everybody else was exploiting his
Right.
breakdown for their own benefit. And here, I agree with a lot of what the media is saying, and I don't think that there's fake news other than Fox News specifically. But I think they're taking every worst case scenario, every statistic that usually is withheld
Yeah,
from
and
the
ginning it
public.
up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's usually either withheld from the public so they don't cause mass panic, or or they're, yeah, emphasizing it to a degree that's unnecessary, where they're exploiting the fears of people, and people who are not well are, the suicide rates already going up. It's going to
Yeah.
get worse. I think a lot of people might start causing mass murder. I mean, there's people hoarding toilet paper. There's people hoarding. I went to try to get disinfecting wipes, from my local Sam's Club, and they said, "Well, you have to come in at Wednesday and Thursday in the morning, and
All
they'll
right.
sell out within 1 hour." It's like
Right.
that's the kind of absolute panic everyone's having,
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
because if it bleeds, it leads. Or I don't know how to rhyme that to coughs, but if it coughs, it's, I don't know. But
Here's
it's,
one other thing I wanted to point out about Network is that
yeah,
they had that omnipotent narrator, and I'm
yeah.
not sure why. I wonder if that was added after the movie was made for some reason. Like they thought,
Mm.
hey, we're gonna have to pull this together with some. At first, I thought that narrator was William Holden because
Huh,
it sounded kind of like his voice.
yeah.
But um, but then at the end, it's like, well, where'd that guy come from? Why was that narrator there? I'd be curious whether that was something that they did as a fix rather
Mm.
than something that was baked in from the beginning.
Like sort of like what they did with Harrison Ford with Blade Runner, where they just shoved in the narration in the end.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
right.
yeah. But I think they did it to give it sort of a journalistic sort of point of
Oh,
view,
maybe.
where
Yeah,
it's like you're seeing the story of the fall of journalism, and this is how it happened.
yeah.
Like that's sort of how I interpreted it, and it didn't feel too forced to me. It could have. It teetered on the line, but it didn't. But yeah,
Mike, I got to get going now.
Well, okay, I'm glad you signed off. But
Yeah.
yes, I believe I hear his car honking outside. Someone's gonna take him somewhere. No, so
To go get some Clorox handy wipes.
yes, get a ton of it, get in a fist fight with someone who's trying to get it. But David, thank you for coming on. Thank you for talking about this. And
That was
folks,
fun, Mike.
yeah, folks, for your own mental well-being, please limit your news intake because it won't make you feel any better.
Well,
It'll
no,
yeah,
just use your critical thinking skills.
yeah. So
Don't
if
don't just accept whatever you hear. Try to dope it out on your own. Listen to other sources. Don't
yeah,
don't just go by what Facebook is telling you.
yes, don't go by a headline in big bold red letters saying coronavirus is here forever and we're gonna live in a dystopian hell.
Yeah,
You have to use your critical mind. And again, journalism isn't fake, but it's sensationalized.
it's
And
business.
yeah, it's a business, and in the end, it's making money off of this tragedy, while also giving you fair journalism about the most incompetent, terrifying White House to have ever existed. So take that as you will.
All right.
Thank you, David McGowan from RavenswoodMedia.com. Go there if you want to see some movies. He's around bats. He films them, but he doesn't eat bat soup.
No.
Okay, and he
All
does.
right. Thanks, Mike. Bye bye.
Okay, thank you guys so much. I'm Mike Crawley. This is You'll Probably Agree. We will see you next time. And before I sign off, I want to thank Galway Bay for being our location that we film at, and hopefully when we get out of this, we can film there again. In the meantime, we'll keep doing this from home, and thank you so much. Bye-bye.